Hello and welcome to day 4 of the Genesis Avengers Advent Calendar. We are here today doing a video that I've been waiting a long time for. But before we get into what that is, patreon.com/Genesis Avengers if you'd like to contribute to the channel. We have multiple tiers that grant you things like early access, which in a normal circumstance would give you 12 to 24 hours early access to the videos we upload. However, this month during the Advent Calendar, that's not the case, because days 1 to 25 will be everyone at the same time will get the video in their public inbox, I suppose you could say, in their subscriptions box. You all get it at the same time. However, for you patrons, there will be an extended calendar at the end of December from days 26 to 31, where you shall get another whole week's of videos. And this is so that I can reward you guys for your contributions to the channel. And then those videos that were in that extended calendar will be uploaded week by week in the new year to the public. And you can also get things like exclusive access to certain kinds of videos and requesting videos for us to do on the master tier. We also have twitter.com/Giandrozani if you'd like to get in contact with us or see what we're talking about. That's always fun. But now we have all the plugs out the way to announce what day 4 is. Well, day 4, I will be ranking all of the films up to this point in the MCU. Of course, early this year, we reviewed all of the MCU films leading up to Avengers Endgame, and then we reviewed Spiderman after that came out a few months after Endgame. So we have 23 films from the first 3 phases of the MCU to rank here, and whenever Black Widow, I suppose, is the next film that comes out, whenever that comes out, this will become not up to date. But for now, for the first 3 phases, I suppose you could say the Infinity Saga, we have 23 films to work with. And I've gone through all of them and ranked them in order from my least favorite to favorite. Now, this is not a definitive factual list, this is just my opinion, so you guys let me know what your rankings are for these films. And I'd also like to give a bit of a disclaimer. There's a couple of things. Firstly, my opinions have changed quite a bit since we reviewed them, so I've got a slightly different outlook on some of the films in this list. Some of them are the same, some of them are different, so my list may surprise you. And on top of that, for you guys who haven't actually seen any of our reviews or aren't familiar with my opinions on the MCU, my list is going to be quite contrary to what most people's would be. I have very different views on some of these films that a lot of people tend to have, so just be aware that my opinions may rub some people the wrong way, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. It's not a personal attack on anyone, it's just me sharing my thoughts on the MCU films. Anyway, hope you all enjoy this video, and let's get on with it. Let's get cracking. So, at number 23 at the very bottom, Captain Marvel. I really don't like this film. On the review, I gave it a 2 out of 10, and I stand by that. I think Captain Marvel is an absolute mess. Not only as a character, as the lead actress Brie Larson, her performance I really don't like. The handling of certain S.H.I.E.L.D. elements like Nick Fury and Phil Coulson, really don't like, especially the fact that Nick Fury's eye, the whole mystery behind his eye patch was revealed that he was scratched by a cat, which makes no sense considering in Winter Soldier that he said that he never trusted anyone after having his eye scratched out, and he doesn't trust anyone because a cat scratched his eye out. That's stupid. The villains in this film, the Skrulls, and also Jude Law's character, I believe it's Jon Rogg, really weak. The writing in this film is not only bland, but it's really stupid. I highly disagree with the moral compass, the fact that they justify Captain Marvel's random acts of violence by the fact that she is an oppressed woman by men, some kind of feminist thing. I find that very strange that they're trying to use female empowerment to justify violence in the way that she does it, which doesn't seem justified to me because it's very random. That's appalling character writing for me, especially considering she's meant to be the next Captain America of sorts. Like, she's meant to be the next big superhero in the MCU, and yet she has these horrible moral standards. And like I said, Brie Larson's performance is atrocious. She's flat as a wooden plank and very disappointing considering she won an Oscar for her performance in the film Room. Captain Marvel is an appalling film. I hate it, and that's why it's at the bottom of my ranking of the MCU, number 23. Just utter trash. Fuck it. Terrible. Then we get to the next one, which is number 22, which is The Incredible Hulk from 2008. This is a very odd film because it feels very disconnected from the MCU, especially considering that Bruce Banner is played by Edward Norton instead of Mark Ruffalo, and I think he's not a good fit for this character. He just doesn't feel right. He doesn't have the charm or the presence. He doesn't have the... just nothing feels right, because Edward Norton, overall in other things, he is a pretty good actor. I've heard good things about him in the Grand Budapest Hotel and all sorts of other stuff, but I don't know, he just doesn't feel right for this role. And on top of that, his romance with Betty Ross is fucking awful. It's so hard to watch, especially Liv Tyler's performance. And just the way they're written, they have no chemistry on screen. It's horrible. The story surrounding the Hulk, the fact that it's like a soft sequel to Hulk 2003, yet it's sort of meant to be a prequel to Avengers. It's just so odd and generic and boring and flat. And I really don't like the villain either, Abomination. It's just a horrible villain. Just nothing to him. Just a generic monster bash science experiment gone wrong. It's very bad. And overall, this film is very dull and painful to watch and just not enjoyable. And one that I would honestly suggest people skip because it's just really bad. I really don't like it. That's why it's my number 22. And I'm happy that they recast Bruce Banner as Mark Ruffalo later on. Then after that, we have the film that most people consider to be the worst. That would be Thor: The Dark World at number 21. It's not good. It's bad. It's a bad film. The Earth plot with Darcy and Jane Foster is fucking nails down a blackboard. It's bad. And, it's just very flat and feels like a bit of a waste of time. But honestly, apart from the Darcy bits, I don't hate it. It's just very mediocre. Very, very mediocre. And I feel like it falls very far because of the production issues. The fact that Kenneth Branagh didn't come back meant that it feels like it's very tied down to its studio, and it's rushed, and it doesn't really do anything with Thor. I mean, he's Chris Hemsworth's fine in it, but it just doesn't feel right. It feels like a big waste of Christopher Eccleston as well. The fact that such a talented actor is wasted on such a generic character. Though I do really like the design of the Dark Elves' costumes and makeup. Just unfortunately, the characters don't do much beyond killing Thor's mum, because that's one of the only parts of the film that is really significant. However, one thing I really like about this film is Loki. I think Loki is fantastic in Dark World. He's one of the saving graces of it. But yeah, this film is below average. I would definitely say it's very much below average, and one that you probably can skip and not miss much, considering that it's brought up again in Endgame and the important stuff is said there. But yeah, Thor: Dark World, I don't think it's the worst MCU film like some people do, but it's still not good. It's very below average, not a good film. That's why it's at my number 21. Then following that, we have number 20, we have Ant-Man and the Wasp. I have no feelings on this film one way or the other. It's just generic, forgettable, average film. There's nothing to it that I care about. I mean, I suppose Paul Rudd and Evangeline Lilly are charming, and Wasp is nice in that suit with her new long hair, but I don't know, I just don't care. I really don't have anything to say about Ant-Man and the Wasp. It's just a very mediocre, boring, forgettable film for me. I found it quite hard to sit through. But I don't really have anything against it either, so which is why it's not lower. But I don't know, just nothing. It's just nothing. It's badly placed as well. The fact that it comes right after Infinity War feels wrong. The storytelling within Phase 3 kind of dipped in quality in between the two big Avengers films, in the sense that Ant-Man and the Wasp and Captain Marvel just don't quite work with the timeline. So yeah, just really don't care about it, honestly. And then moving on from that, So, up to this point, I think the rankings of the film has been fairly business as usual. I know that Captain Marvel is very liked in some fan circles, but in others it's not. But the other three aren't particularly highly regarded at all. But from here, this is where it starts to get controversial. This is where my list starts to sort of deviate from what most people say, especially in the general public, because my number 19 is a very popular film, especially with some fan circles, especially considering that it won awards at the Oscars, and I'm sure you'll know what this is now. It's Black Panther. I feel bad putting it this low, because I feel like I really want to like this film, because I really like Black Panther in Civil War. I really like Chadwick Boseman as an actor. I really like Michael B. Jordan as an actor as well, the actor who plays Killmonger. And there's a lot of potential here, like some of the African culture that they try and put into the film. I really appreciate it visually speaking. But the problem for me is that when I start to think about this film logically, it really does fall apart. Like, when you ask yourself, how did no one ever find Wakanda? The fact that it's, okay, so it's surrounded by these trees, but you can literally just walk through them. And the fact that not only can you walk through these trees because they are fake, but in real life, even if the trees were real, you can still walk through trees. You can still walk through them. And the fact that no one just did that, it seems very odd to me. On top of that, you've got the fact that this film establishes that they have an unlimited resource of the suits and the... I think it's like a soup or like a... I don't know what the word is for it, but there's like a liquid that the Panther drinks to get his power. And the fact that it's like 50 of those plants that produce that soup or nectar or whatever it's called, and it's like almost infinitely resourced. Very odd, the fact that the one thing that gives T'Challa his power anyone could have. I think really for me it sort of devalues the character, and I know that some people might come back and say, well, the whole point is that you're meant to give the power to the Panther, but I just don't buy it. It's the whole excuse that it's tradition feels a bit odd, because this isn't a tradition that's built off like a religion. This is literally one that is done via a tribe discovering a resource, and for some reason thinking that it would be a good idea not to use that resource to its full potential for the productivity, the defense, the military, all that sort of thing of their tribe. I'm not saying that it's impossible for this kind of thing to happen. I just personally find it very hard to believe that no one in the existence of Wakanda would ever think to do something different, like the fact that they all accept the tradition exactly the way it is without thinking of, well, what if this, what if that? Because if you're trying to construct a political story based around these traditions, it would be believable that there would be groups of people that would think, well, wouldn't it be better if we all had this power so we can all defend Wakanda, especially a villain like Killmonger. But it's just very odd. The fact that it's never really properly explained why T'Chaka had to kill his brother. Like, the fact that it was 100% necessary for him to do so, it's never really justified. And also the fact that Killmonger, because his father died, wants to kill children. Huh? Why does he want to kill children? And then, what else is there? There's so much more. Like, the CGI fight at the end is very badly executed in terms of its effects, and you got like the fact that even though it's starting out as this story that's trying to be political, it ends up boiling down in Act 3 to a very generic battle. The fact that Killmonger gets stabbed in the heart yet survives for ages and then walks all the way up and to the cliffside and then dies. It's very odd. What else is there? There's so much more. The fact that this place, Wakanda, is built off the fact that it has this massive resource of vibranium, yet they decisively decide to build their towns with things like straw and wood, which stylistically has like a pretty visual, but when you think about like the reasons why they would do that, it's like, why wouldn't you use vibranium on all of your structure? You know, wouldn't that be the smart thing to do? There's a lot of problems with this film. Like, why are they farming rhinos? What would be the purpose of that? Like, the fact that they fenced around with sticks. Oh, yep, they're friendly rhinos. Fine, great. That makes so much sense. This film. Oh, this film. And the fact that Claw was the only one that knew about the vibranium. Odd. And the fact that, you know, if Iron Man heard about this place, that wouldn't it make sense for him to fly around Africa to check it out? Then you bleed that into something like Infinity War, where it's like, why didn't they use, like, logically speaking, why doesn't Wakanda use the juice and the suits to power up all of their soldiers for the best chance against Thanos? Like, obviously if you win Infinity War and that was the case, it would be boring to watch because they're all Panthers. But, like, forgetting the entertainment value of the films, logically speaking, why wouldn't you do that? Oh, because tradition. Well, guess what? If Thanos kills all of you, you're not going to have any fucking tradition left, are you? Oh, this film just... It's so incoherent. And, like, I know that it's got great music and there's some really nice, like, mix of African culture mixed with, like, the Marvel sci-fi, visually speaking, and the actors and all that, but, like, it's just... As soon as you start to think about it from a logical point of view, it just falls apart. It's so difficult for me to get invested in what the story's trying to do without it being interrupted by all these problems. God, it's a frustrating film, this one, which is why it's my number 19. I think, whilst this may piss some people off, especially Anthony, because I realise this is one of his favourites, but I just... God, it frustrates me thinking about Black Panther. Which is why I put it at number 19. Moving on, number 18, another film with a lot of problems, Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange is a film that I thought I would really enjoy, because it targets, obviously, time and space travel, which is, as this is primarily a Doctor Who channel, I'm sure you'll understand that that's definitely up my alley. But I think the big problem with Doctor Strange and its sort of time and space travel elements is the fact that the sort of portals, I suppose you could say, is the main source of this. It's very much explained in the way that it's a bunch of magic that happens and, you know, you are allowed to travel between certain areas in space and through certain time periods, I believe. Or I know it's space travel for sure, but time is a little bit more complicated because you can't really just do it off the bat. You can see through time, though. However, in terms of space travel, it's very much loose-ended in the sense that it just allows you to do so. And whilst that's cool in terms of the magic, when it comes to quantifying the stakes and feeling the tension of the film, it's very difficult for me to comprehend what the stakes are, in the sense that they don't really establish what you cannot do with the portals. Because, you know, why isn't it like, okay, so if you're faced up with a bunch of villains in this film, like Doctor Strange is at some points, okay, well, why didn't you draw a portal around them and then fly them into the sun? Oh, well, of course, because the story would be boring and it wouldn't end climactically if you did that. But logically speaking, why wouldn't you do that? And I think that a film like this needed a bit more explaining of its logic for there to be more tension within the action scenes. And if there were limits to these portals and what you can do with them, I think it would be a far stronger film in terms of how it works, and how the space travel becomes a threat and becomes a weakness at the same time. On top of that, the character of Stephen Strange is very odd because he's very much an arsehole, similar to Tony Stark at the start of this film. And his character development comes from the fact that he reads some books, and it feels a bit odd considering that his character change comes from learning this power rather than a change of his morals. It's odd, the sense that he changes so drastically this way. It's also odd because this film is very generic considering that it's meant to be one of the weirdest of the MCU films, but it just doesn't feel right. It's so bland, especially the Earth side of the plot. You know, there are some cool little moments in Doctor Strange, but it feels wasted, the fact that it has so many generic elements, and the fact that I find it difficult to get invested in the stakes because it's hard for me to imagine what could go wrong, logically speaking. But I suppose the bit at the end where he confronts Dormammu and says the words over and over again is a nice little line. And there's some really cool visual effects in Doctor Strange, but overall I just feel like it falls flat, which is why it's my number 18. At number 17 we have Iron Man 2. I don't hate this film. I don't think I dislike this film as much as some other people do. But it's definitely not good. Like, not that good. It just really feels like it doesn't really know what it wants to do. It's got two villains. It's got Whiplash and Justin Hammer. Whiplash is kind of a failure. Mickey Rourke is very odd. Justin Hammer is okay, but just very cartoonish ending to the film with him. And the ending of the film is one of the biggest problems with it, in the sense that it just sort of ends and that's it. And the middle section is very draggy and sort of gets tied up in the whole shield building bit. And there's a lot of padding in this film. I do enjoy Tony Stark a lot in this film, though. I think Robert Downey Jr.'s performance is definitely the highlight. And the first section of him in the Formula One part I really enjoy. Though it is a bit action schlock blockbuster. Like, I feel like Iron Man 2 is one of the more obvious examples of the MCU going, hey, we need a sequel to Iron Man, let's make some money, and it very much lacks a bit of that substance. There's some good little bits and pieces in Iron Man 2, but it's very meh. There's not much to say about it beyond that. Moving on, number 16, I believe it is. Yup, number 16. We have Captain America, the first Avenger. And I think retrospective and retroactively, I can see some of the strengths in terms of Steve Rogers' character, because the way it connects to Winter Soldier and Civil War. Definitely there's a solid starting point for Steve Rogers' character here, as well as, you've got like Bucky and Peggy. But overall, I'm really not a fan of this film. I find especially the second half to be very slashed. Like, the pacing's awful. I find this film very boring to watch. It's just not for me. And I really, really don't like Red Skull as the villain. Like, I find Red Skull completely obnoxious and just horrible to watch. And like, this film, I suppose it's got its strengths, but it's just, not only do I not like the villain, not only do I think it's badly paced and very boring and dull and not necessarily what I look for, outside of the Steve Rogers little bits that they have for his character, which I do think there are some good parts in there, especially when he's sort of becoming Captain America. I just don't have much interest in this film and its characters. But I think one of the big things that rubs me the wrong way about the first Avenger is how obnoxiously patriotic it is, and how much they not only are so high in pride on how American they are, but the fact that this is a film that very much glorifies war, in the sense that its moral value is that it's almost like they're saying the absolute right thing to do is to fight in a war, and that is the ultimate heroic thing. And I suppose during World War II in the 40s, that was definitely something that a lot of people held because of the extremities of the circumstance. But I just, personally for me, I'm not on board with that. I'm very, I think I said in the review, I'm a bit of a coward myself inside. And I really don't like this whole mantra of fighting in a war, the way that it's presented, in the sense that this is a war of human history. It really just rubs me the wrong way. I just really don't like it. Yeah, so First Avenger is definitely not a film I'm not very fond of. But it does have some strong points, especially for building up Steve Rogers as a character. But I'm just, very much didn't enjoy it that much. Which is why it's at my number 18. Number 17. This is probably my most controversial opinion in the MCU. And when I reviewed this, I felt a lot of peer pressure, or not necessarily peer pressure, but just overall pressure to have a somewhat positive outlook on this film. But as time has passed, I think that I've become more comfortable to be candid in my thoughts on this film. And that is my number 17 is Thor Ragnarok, which is a very popular film, and I'm one of the very few people that doesn't like it that much. Where do I begin? So, I find the comedy in this film to be like nails down a blackboard. It's horribly cringy. Just the fact that it abuses the kind of New Zealand humour that I see all the time on TV ads, with no satire, no subtlety. There's nothing to it that's clever. It doesn't have any kind of meat to it, to something else like, something else that Taika Waititi's directed, like Boy or What We Do in the Shadows, has some great satire to it. There's a TV show, New Zealand TV show that aired back in the day called Brotown, which has this kind of New Zealand humour, but it's very much tied to the reality of people that live in New Zealand, and I can appreciate that a lot more than something like Thor Ragnarok, which is, it's so painful for me to watch. And also when you think about the characters, I don't care at all for the Grandmaster, which is Jeff Goldblum's character. I know that's a controversial opinion because Jeff Goldblum's very popular, but I just don't give a shit about him. I don't find him funny at all. I find him very awkward. Valkyrie, don't give a shit about her. What else is there? There's Hela, very weak villain for me. I don't really care about her at all. The loss of Asgard, because the people of Asgard aren't really focused on, I don't feel for them. I only feel disappointment in the sense that one of my favourite parts of the Thor sort of source material is the whole mythology of Asgard itself and its placement in the MCU, in the sense that it's this place that's very different to everything else, and I quite like that whole thing. The fact that we lose it in this film I find very disappointing. I know that that's the whole point, that Thor's character is the fact that he's meant to be losing everything, but it's just disappointing to me because I didn't feel the impact of it, because I feel like I didn't really know any of the characters. Like Heimdall is very underused. The Warriors 3 are fucking pointless. Sif doesn't even appear. It's a really bad sequel as well, in the sense that I get that people really didn't like Dark World, because neither did I, but the way that it follows it up, and almost instead of trying to take the story in a direction and follow up and do something smart in the way that it ties to the other Thor films, it just stamps on it and makes fun of it. It's almost like the only thing that it can do with itself is try and just bully the other Thor films, so that people can be like, look at me, I'm Ragnarok, I'm better than you, like me, because I'm the quirky, funny Thor film and not the other ones. Really rubbed me the wrong way. Thor as a character, much more relatable, and just he's very much just a guy now. Obviously he's lost quite a lot and he harnesses a lot of power, but in terms of his personality, he's much more, I would say, humanized in this film, which I don't dislike, but I think I preferred how he was executed in the first Thor. I much prefer that more alien side to his character, though I will say that I think later on in Infinity War, the Ragnarok style Thor is done much better, which I really like. But yeah, I'm not a big fan, and just I would say, in terms of positives, I like Loki. However, he doesn't have that much presence in this film. I think he has much more to do in Dark World. I really like Odin. I think the scenes with Odin are the best scenes in the film. And there are some positives, but I just don't like the comedy, in the sense that I think that because this is a film that's dominated by comedy, and I don't like the comedy, I think really lets it down for me, because the predominant factor in this film, the one massive thing that this film is known for, is something that I'm not into, is one of the reasons why it really doesn't work for me. And I know this is a controversial opinion, because I know a lot of people love this film. Oh, one other thing, I do really like Hulk. I think really Hulk is a really strong point of the film. But it's just not for me. Ragnarok's just not for me. I just don't like it. Moving on. Ragnarok was 15, right? Yeah, Ragnarok was 15, which means that Iron Man 3 is number 14, I believe. Iron Man 3, very mixed feelings I have. I really, really like the first half, but I really don't like the second half. And a lot of people will say one of the reasons why they don't like Iron Man 3 is because of the Mandarin twist. For me, it's not necessarily the twist itself, it's just the fact that it doesn't really lead to anything. And I just feel like the last act of this film is very weak. Like, I really don't care for the whole Rhodey Iron Man buddy cop thing. And then the final fight, it's just a mess against Killian, and then Pepper Potts becoming some reincarnated thing. I don't even know how to describe it. And then Tony blowing up his suits. You know, it's got some, I suppose, metaphorical poetry to the theme of the film of him, you know, letting go of being Iron Man and becoming Tony himself. But it doesn't really work because, you know, he becomes Iron Man again after this. But I suppose there's some parts of it that work. But then, yeah, I mean, the first half of this film for me is good enough to put it this high on the list. I believe it's number 15. I'm losing track of the numbers here. No, 14. Number 14, yeah. So yeah, very mixed feelings on Iron Man 3. I wasn't really sure where to put this in the list. But number 14 for me, I think, is where it lies. Now, number 13, this is another weird one for me to talk about, is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, which is Adam's favourite MCU film. And I'm very conflicted on this because I feel like Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 is a good script and a good story. There's a lot in here on paper that has been described to me and that I read within the text, and just the fact that on paper, like me thinking about what happens in this film and what it does for the characters, it does ring true in the sense that it is very well written for what it is. And I do see why Adam loves it. But on the flip side of that, in terms of my enjoyment of this film, I really didn't enjoy it. Like, I had a horrible time watching this film. And I think the best way I can describe this film for me, in an analogy, is to say, well, it's almost like when you go to the hospital and you have surgery done on you, and you get out of the hospital and you tell the story to people about what happened and how it affected you emotionally and physically and how life-changing it was. Very, very impactful part of your life being in this hospital. You know, maybe you had a heart attack or something. And it's a grand story and it's really impactful. But when you are actually in hospital, it's not like you enjoyed it one bit. Like, being in hospital and having these horrible things happen to you is not nice. And I feel like my viewing of this film is very similar to that in the sense that it is a really good story, but I just don't enjoy it. I don't like watching it. Though I will say there are some little bits in here that I like. Drax, mainly. I really like Drax's character in it, as I did in the first one. Just Dave Bautista is very charming. And the twist that Ego gave his Star-Lord's mother cancer, very, very big twist, very heartbreaking. But yeah, I just don't connect with this film the way that some others seem to. It just doesn't work for me. It doesn't sit right. I don't think it's badly executed in terms of its, like, some parts of it, like I do with Thor Ragnarok, but it just, yeah, this film I just don't enjoy in the slightest. But I do recognize that it is a very strong story. I just don't think it's for me, which is why it's my number 13. Then we get to number 12, which is Ant-Man, which is a very average film. I like Paul Rudd as Scott Lang. Yellow Jacket's a bit of a weak villain, but I do really like the action sequences at the end. I think they're quite creative. I think some of the visuals are quite interesting, especially when he first shrinks. This is as you'd expect, a small film, and it's very non-spectacular and not memorable that well. And it's not particularly great in any sense, but I don't know, it's okay. It's average. It's probably like the most average MCU film, and there's not much more I can say about it beyond that. After that, this is an interesting one to talk about. So my number 11 is Spiderman Homecoming, which is a film when I first saw in theaters I really, really liked, but as time has gone on, I've grown less fond of it. I will start with the positives. I love Vulture. I think Michael Keaton as Vulture is the best part of the whole film. He's a phenomenal actor, and I love his villain. Vulture is fantastic, and especially the scene when he's in the car with Peter Parker. I do like Iron Man, though he does feel a bit like a cheapened equivalent to Uncle Ben. Doesn't quite work as well, but I do like Iron Man. It's always nice to see Robert Downey Jr. And I do like Tom Holland as an actor. I really like him as an actor in this film. I just think that this characterization of Spider-Man does not work for me, as well as Tobey Maguire's. It misses a lot of the elements that I like in the character and make me relate to him. This version of Spider-Man feels very stripped back of his core elements, and just it doesn't feel the same to me. A lot of the high school characters I don't really care for that much, and the story just doesn't feel right. Like, there's not enough stakes, not enough loss. Like, the best thing about Spider-Man for me as a character, the way I see him, is the fact that he is so broken by what life throws at him, and yet he still has to remain the hero because it's the right thing to do. Yeah, I feel like in Spider-Man Homecoming, this version of Spider-Man feels a lot more generalized, and there's a lot less for me to latch onto. And I really don't like the way AntMan is characterized. And I think one of the big reasons I rank this film lower than the one that's going to be next, you can probably do the maths, is I think this film has very stale direction. It's not bad, but it's just not the Spider-Man film that I would want to see, personally, though I do really like Vulture, which puts it above some of the other MCU films. But yeah, as time has gone on, this one has really slipped in my mind, and this version of the MCU Spider-Man is not, even though I do like Tom Holland as an actor, it just doesn't quite work the way that I would prefer Spider-Man to roll. And I also think the comedy in Tom Holland Spider-Man films feel a lot more forced than something like the Raimi films, where they're very meme-worthy. I know I'm being, maybe a little bit unfair trying to compare it to the Raimi films, because the Raimi films are very distinct compared to this MCU version, but it's just the way I see it. The way I see Spider-Man in my brain, in my head, is very defined a certain way. But I do understand if someone else enjoys it more. It's just the way it is. But considering I've just said all that, it probably comes at no surprise that Spider-Man Far From Home is my number 10. Because my feelings on Far From Home are very similar to Homecoming. I really like Mysterio as the villain, similarly to how I like Vulture. But a lot of my complaints with Far From Home are very similar to Homecoming, because there's a lot of similarities in the sense. The one main reason why I put it above Homecoming, though, is because I think the direction is much better. I think the direction is much more polished and much more creative, which puts it a notch above Homecoming. But in terms of everything else, I think it's very similar. I think the comedy is very forced. I think the characterization of Spider-Man could be much better. And also another thing, J. Jonah Jameson in the post-credit scene also bumps it up a bit. Really like that. But yeah, these Spider-Man films for me, I don't dislike necessarily, but I just don't think they quite work for what I would want from a Spider-Man film. Though, that being said, Far From Home still just makes the top 10. I just think that's really a testament to the fact that I think a lot of the MCU films are quite average. I don't think they are quite as good as people say, though that is just my opinion. But moving on from that, we now move to my number 9, which is quite a controversial opinion, considering how high I've ranked this. My number 9 is Thor, the first Thor film, which is a very disliked film. Not as much as Dark World, but it is quite a disliked film. And whilst it's certainly not great, there's no doubt it's not great at all. I don't know, I just like this one. Like, there's something about the fantasy of this Thor franchise that really piques my interest. Something about the whole Shakespearean gods and demons in space that really interests me. And I really like Thor as a character, and also Chris Hemsworth as an actor in this film. I think he knocks it out as the park as Thor. The whole fish out of water, him being an alien, but the fact that at the start of the film he is at the highest of heights and is taken down a peg. The scene at the middle of the film where he tries to grab the hammer and can't lift it, I love that scene. It's so good. The storytelling in the sense that he isn't worthy anymore because he isn't being a good person of sorts, but he also isn't being the hero he's meant to be. And what I like about this film is it really takes him down a peg, makes him think about his morals, and by the end of the film he really redeems himself and becomes a hero again. I really like Loki. Loki is a really good character. I love his backstory and the fact that he's relatable. He's a relatable villain. And the fact that he's been second fiddle to Thor all this time, Thor's little brother. The fact that he's partly frost giant, so he There's almost a tribalism element to it, in the sense that he comes from this race of creatures that are looked down upon by the Asgardians. The fact that Odin is so wise yet is so morally conflicted. It does some quite horrible things, especially to Loki, in the sense that he's also trying to follow this sort of tradition of Thor becoming king of Asgard and god of thunder. The Earth plot I don't think is bad. I just think that characters like a Jane Foster is just very average. There's not much to her. She's quite a generic character. Darcy I don't like, however she's not as prevalent as she is in Dark World, so I can sort of let it slide a little bit. Eirich Selvig, whatever. But mainly I just really like the way the film unfolds, and I do realise that it's a little bit generic at some points, especially with the Earth plot. But there's just some little scenes in this film that I really appreciate. And whilst I do understand the criticism that maybe the Dutch angles were a bit much, I don't mind them, because I feel like in the fantasy realm they aren't as off-putting as they are in something like The Idiot's Lantern. I feel like I can handle the Dutch angles more when it's in Asgard, though when they are on Earth it's a little bit off-putting. But yeah, I was really pulled in by the fantasy that this film showed. And I don't know, there's just something about Thor 1 that really pulled me in and interested me. It was one of the films in Phase 1 that I really enjoyed. And there was a lot of potential in this film that I felt like that I was hoping that I would get in the future. Unfortunately, with Dark World, it wasn't well executed. And then with Ragnarok, they went for a complete change of tone and not in a direction that I really wanted or appreciated when I got it. So, yeah, controversially, my favourite Thor film, singular Thor film anyway, is Thor, is the original Thor, which I rank number 9, which I'm sure a lot of you will disagree with, but it's just how I feel about it, honestly. Now, moving on from that one, number 8, we have the first ever MCU film, that being Iron Man. I think Iron Man's a very strong film for Tony Stark's character. He is the central point, and he is really good in this film. And I really do like the opening, 45 minutes, I think are extremely strong, the whole terrorist plot. I also think the middle section with Obadiah Stane is quite good, though some of the direction in that's quite stale. I like the whole plot of him building his armor and suit, though I do think the film falls off a little bit in the final battle when he becomes Ironmonger. When Obadiah Stane becomes Ironmonger, I feel like it really rips away a lot of that character that we saw beforehand, because the scene where he almost chokes out Tony in his lounge, I think is fantastic. But of course, the final line of the film, I am Iron Man, is iconic. This is a very solid film. I think it has flaws, but overall is a really good starting point for the MCU, and a really good start point for the character of Tony Stark. Yeah, really like Iron Man. Don't love it, but I think it's good. Really good film. Moving on from that, we have a film that, again, I think is controversial for how high I rank it, and that is Avengers Age of Ultron, which a lot of people hate, apparently. And again, I don't think it's a great film necessarily, but I just like it. I really like the concept of Ultron, in the sense that he is an amalgamation of Tony's arrogance, and that he's a spawn of Jarvis, who ends up being Vision in this film, which is another thing I really like about it. But yeah, the whole concept of Ultron really fascinates me. I love the party scene. I think the party scene is fantastic and one of the highlights of the whole film of Age of Ultron. I really like how the Hawkeye's house section of the film really strips back the characters. There's something about this film being the quiet Avengers film, and it being different to the first, I think is a smart move. I just appreciate how this takes a different approach with the Avengers. And yeah, there's some flaws with this film, like Thor's side plot's a bit meh. But you know what, I just really enjoy it, and I also really like the twist of them building up Hawkeye's character, and then you think that he's going to be the one that gets killed when he's protecting that child, and then it ends up being Quicksilver. I think is a really nice twist. Not an all-time great film by any means, and it is definitely the weakest of the Avengers films, but I think I like this film a lot more than some people seem to. For me, this is if this film was called Iron Man 4, I feel like people might like it a bit more. At least for me anyway, because I think that this is probably the strongest of the Iron Man type films, because Ultron is definitely an Iron Man villain. There's no doubt about that. But yeah, I just really enjoyed this one. I appreciate it, and I think it's good. Very solid film with a few flaws, but some strength that I appreciate a lot. Which is why it's at my number 7. I don't think me praising this film necessarily shows that I love it or anything. I just think it shows that there is a whole bunch of other films in the MCU that I don't think are as strong as other people think they are. And this one sort of sits around the solid mark. But yeah, Age of Ultron is my number 7. Moving on from that, we now get into the films that I really do like. Number 6 for me is Guardians of the Galaxy. I think this is a fantastic film. I love the characters. I love the journey they take to come together. I love the space adventure. This for me is like what people say about Ragnarok and their appeal for it. I feel like Guardians is what I really like with this sort of genre. I think the characters are fantastic. Star-Lord, Groot, Rocket, Gamora, and Drax, fantastic. I love the journey through space. I love the visuals. I love the effects. I love the humor. Just the whole 80s vibe is fantastic. I find Star-Lord to be such a very relatable lead. I love the whole team aspect. The only real downer I have is I think Ronan the Accuser is quite a weak villain. He feels very much like a henchman of Thanos. But apart from that, I think this is a very strong film, and it's my number 6. I really like Guardians of the Galaxy a lot. Now, my top 5. I think these films are fucking sublime. These are great films. My number 5 is Captain America: The Winter Soldier. Boy, the Russos took Captain America and made him so much better than what he was. He is, in the modern day, it's such an interesting political element, the sense that he's come from the 40s where the war is very black and white politically, and then he's taken to the modern circumstance where everything is shades of grey. It's fantastic, the build-up of Bucky's return. You got the whole S.H.I.E.L.D. plot. I think this is probably the best film for S.H.I.E.L.D. with Nick Fury in it. He's fantastic in it. I love Falcon. I love Black Widow. Winter Soldier is such a good film. It's brilliant, and I think it's got some of the best action sequences in the MCU. It's very well shot. It's very violent, and I love the way that the Russos executed the action in this film, and it's so good. There's so many parts of this I like, and Alexander Pierce as well. Excellent villain. And yeah, I just love all the twists and turns in the way that this film goes. It's just fantastic. Just really, really like it. Captain America: The Winter Soldier is sublime, and that's why it's my number 5. Number 4 is The Avengers. It's classic. The Avengers is the prototype Marvel classic film. It's fantastic to see all these characters put together for the first time, and in the first half they clash. Some of the dynamics, like the writing from Joss Whedon, is brilliant. He's such a wordsmith with the comedy and the dynamic between the characters. Just fantastic. I think Loki is a fantastic villain. He's so good in this film. He's almost perfect. Just brilliant performance from Tom Hiddleston. I think the Incredible Hulk really comes into his own as Mark Ruffalo was recast in the role. He's fantastic as Bruce Banner. I really like the way that they finally nailed Hulk on screen. Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, S.H.I.E.L.D., it's all fantastic. The only real weak point that I have is I feel like Hawkeye didn't really get enough character. And I think maybe that was a little bit of a letdown. There's some little nitpicky bits in here. But Avengers overall I love. I think it's a great film. I really enjoy it. And it's just the great way to have your Phase 1 finale be this film. I think there's a reason why it's gone down in history. It's just such an essential film to watch. It's so fun, so exciting, and so epic and iconic. And of course the score. What can you say about the score? Number 4, The Avengers. Then we move on to my number 3. Oh, this is so good. Captain America: Civil War. Oh, it's such a good film. It's such a good film, especially considering that I hadn't seen any trailers before I watched it. I didn't know any of the surprises about Black Panther, about Spiderman, about AntMan, about Hawkeye, Vision, any of them. It's just, the way it blends the style of Winter Soldier with the Avengers, I think, is so perfect. The way it's a sequel to Age of Ultron and a prequel to Infinity War is fantastic. What it does for Captain America's character is fantastic. And Iron Man, the clash between them, the fact that they differ on this idea of how to run the Avengers and whether or not they need to be using their superpowers or not. Yet, both sides are so understandable. The way this film is written is sublime. The action sequences are great, the tension's great, and the way this ties into Tony Stark and Steve Rogers' arcs are fantastic. The twist that obviously Bucky, not by his own choice, was the ones that killed Tony's parents is fantastic, and I love the way this film ends in the sense that Captain America could have killed Tony, and the fact that Tony thinks he would, yeah, he doesn't. Oh, it's just brilliant in the way Captain America gives his shield back. It's just so good. This is such a good film. I've got very little nitpicks with it. I think Sharon Carter is not the best, and there's some dodgy cinematography in one of the first action sequences, but then you go back to Zemo as a villain, and the way it introduces not only Black Panther but Spider-Man, it's just fantastic. Civil War is phenomenal. That's why it's my number 3, one of my favourite superhero films I've ever seen. Captain America Civil War. It's fantastic. Then we have number 2, which is Avengers Endgame. The best theatre experience I've ever had in my life. Coming off watching all these films in order, then watching Endgame. I love it. There's some valid criticisms I could see people having, in the sense there's little plot holes here and there, in the sense that, you know, obviously the stones were destroyed at the start of the film, yet the universe didn't converge like they said it would. It's a bit of a plot hole. Some of the things that I related to in other films, like Doctor Strange, yeah, there's all that. But aside from that, I think this is such a brilliant finale to the Infinity Saga. It's fantastic. It's got great fan service, yet great character development. For a 3-hour film, it's so brilliantly paced and brilliantly executed. It's filled to the brim. The acting is off the charts, the dialogue's off the charts, the performances are off the charts, the writing is off the charts. It's so epic, the score's fantastic, the direction's fantastic, the story's fantastic. I loved it. I cried when Iron Man died in this film. It's such a brilliant finale. I suppose one of the criticism I have of this film is Captain Marvel. I really don't like Captain Marvel. I think she's a hindrance to the film. But apart from that, brilliant. I love Avengers Endgame. And the only other film that beats it for me at my number 1 is Avengers Infinity War. I think this film is about as close to perfection that the MCU has gotten. Thanos as a character, this is his film and he's my favourite character in the MCU. I love Thanos. Just everything. Iron Man, Spider-Man, Thor, Black Widow, Black Panther, the Guardians of the Galaxy, Hulk, Bucky, Nebula, Scarlet Witch, Vision, Doctor Strange. It's all so good. I suppose Captain America doesn't get as much to do, but even then, his part in the film is still really good. I love his little bit at the end with Thanos, the sense that Thanos is using magic powers to fend off everyone, yet he has the respect for Captain America to give him a straight old punch to the face. Just the entire plot for this film is so brilliant. I love Infinity War, and the twist at the end with the snap is iconic and brutal and brilliant, and just Thanos. Infinity War is phenomenal. I love it, and it's my number 1 MCU film. It's brilliant. I absolutely love Infinity War. So yeah, that is my ranking of the MCU films. Let me know, guys, what your rankings are, what you thought of mine, especially considering some of my rankings are quite controversial. I'd be very interested to hear what you guys all think. But yeah, comment below. Hope you enjoyed this video. I know it may have rubbed some people the wrong way, but it is what it is. It is my list, and yeah, hope you all enjoyed it even if you didn't like it. But yeah, that's about it really. That's my ranking of the MCU, so we will see you all tomorrow for Day 5 of the Genesis Evangeliani Advent Calendar for 2019.